Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Bayou Bets. I'm Zach Ewing here with Advocate Sports columnist Scott Rabalais. We are live to you from Atlanta, just about a mile from Mercedes-Benz Stadium here, the Hyatt Regency downtown Atlanta, and getting set for the SEC Championship tomorrow between LSU and number one Georgia. Rab, obviously LSU a huge underdog in this game, a 17.5-point spread. We were just discussing it's the third biggest spread in SEC Championship game history. Tall order for the Tigers.
It is. I mean, as expected. I mean, Georgia's the reigning national champions. They went 12-0 this year, 8-0 in conference in the regular season for the second straight year. I think they've won 30 of their last 31 games going back to the 2020 season. And, of course, LSU coming off the disappointing loss to Texas A&M. Would it have made a big difference if LSU won the game, even a close game against Texas A&M in the spread?
The spread went from about 16 to 17.5 after that game. Whether that's because of LSU's performance, probably combined with the fact that Jaden Daniels suffered an ankle injury, he's going to play. Is he going to be 100% running the ball? I don't know that anyone knows that. So those two things combined. But it does harken back to a previous LSU championship game appearance. In fact, their first SEC championship game appearance in 2001, right?
It certainly does. I mean, in 2001, LSU got beat by Tennessee during the season, got routed at home by Florida, like Tennessee did to LSU this year in Tiger Stadium. They came back around. That was, of course, the year everything got pushed back a week because of 9/11. The championship game got moved back to the second week of December, and LSU played Tennessee. Tennessee came in number 2 in the country. Their fans brought orange roses because they thought they were going to the Rose Bowl to play Miami for the national championship, then the BCS national championship, and LSU won the game. Not only won the game, but won the game with Tennessee sending the starting quarterback Rohan Davey to the hospital. Matt Mock came off the bench and earned the MVP honors as a dual threat quarterback. It didn't throw for a great number, but with his feet, he really had Tennessee off guard, and LSU won 31-20. Probably still stands as the biggest upset in SEC championship game history. And I'm not saying LSU is going to repeat history tomorrow afternoon, but it certainly reminds you of those circumstances, of that similar kind of matchup. Although, looking back on it, I was surprised to find out that Tennessee was only a touchdown favorite over LSU, not 17 like it is in this one.
Yeah, in fact, this is the third largest spread in SEC championship history. As we said, the only two others, Alabama over Florida in 2016, I believe. And then it was Steve Spurrier's Florida team over Arkansas back in 1995, and just the fourth championship game. Look, is LSU expected to win? Absolutely not. Can they? Sure. That's why they play the games. What is the path in your eyes to LSU winning this game? We actually have a stat breakdown that just kind of shows how dominant Georgia is. LSU's numbers are fine. Look, you could be in the 30s playing an SEC schedule and everything. You'll have a good season. But, I mean, look at those Georgia numbers and tell me what LSU needs to do to, number one, stay in this thing, and number two, ultimately pull it out.
Well, they got to make the scoring chances count. And we saw Georgia be vulnerable a couple of times this year. Against Missouri, I think that was on the road. They only won by 4. And against Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, they won 16-6. And Kentucky had some chances in the red zone, and they couldn't capitalize on. They had one length of the field drive, and that was it. If LSU gets a chance, they got to be good, and so they probably got to be better at the particular thing is passing offense. They got to be better at that. Take some shots downfield. I agree with Gary Danielson from CBS said that leading into the game, that he thinks LSU needs to go over the top of Georgia's formidable front seven, and throw to those receivers, like Butte and Lacey and Neighbors and Thomas, and try to make something happen. What the heck? You're the underdog, right? You got to shake it up a little bit. You got to take some chances, and so I think that's what LSU's going to do. Plus, of course, get a dual threat effort from Jaden Daniels. He is. I can't imagine he's going to be 100%. They say he's going to play. He did come back in the game. It's worth mentioning. He got hurt twice in the Texas A&M game. Came back both times. But you've got to imagine that ankle probably hurt worse the next day and in subsequent days. And he was in a walking boot on Monday. He's got to be a dual threat. He can't just be staying back in the pocket because Georgia they're relentless. They're not like Tennessee, who's just can boom boom boom. All of a sudden maybe they've got you down 3 touchdowns. They're just relentless. They come at you with pressure and pressure and pressure. And you've got to, when you get an opportunity, and the opportunities will come, LSU has to capitalize on them and capitalize with touchdowns.
And I mean, I'll point out the bottom column of that stat preview too is turnover margin. And frankly, neither team's been all that good in that. If you're going to spring a big upset, you're going to have to get a couple of turnovers, maybe a couple of red zone stops, a short field, something like that. And those are, of course, just your everyday recipe for an upset.
Yeah, I mean, turnovers can be a big factor in the game. Look at last week's LSU Texas A&M game. They fought back, had all the momentum, tied it to 17. They're moving the ball. Looks like they're going to they've stopped A&M 3 and out. So
I bet on them
twice.
Live.
Did you? Yeah, I'm sure. It looked like a good
right
bet.
before the fumble, yeah.
And then a fumble by Jaden Daniels, a scoop and score, and then that was it, basically. So yeah, turnover can change the game, and but I think if Georgia gets up on LSU, they're gonna do less to try to turn the ball over. They're gonna be content. Oh, we're up 10-0. Okay, well, that's pretty good. Oh, we're up 13-0. Okay, well, we're gonna run the ball a lot, and we're not going to take a lot of chances that gives LSU a chance to get back in the game with a turnover in a short field, as you said.
Right. I just realized our names are reversed on this. That's Scott Rabalais. I'm Zach Ewing. This is a special edition of Bayou Bets. It's hard with cameras and which direction it's going to be and everything. We're not going to make you move. It's all right. We're here in downtown Atlanta previewing the SEC championship game. Comes your way at 3 o'clock tomorrow from Mercedes-Benz Stadium, 3 o'clock Central, that is, and it's aired on CBS. The last SEC championship game on CBS, at least for the foreseeable future, which is another interesting quirk. Let's talk Jaden Daniels, because we mentioned how that could have shifted the line. He's in a walking boot, was an ankle sprain. You've been in all the press conferences. We haven't seen him practice. We don't know his mobility right now. I don't think anybody will until the game starts. Even in warm-ups, you can't tell for sure. What is your sense of how seriously he'll be limited?
I think he'll be limited somewhat. The walking boot thing is obviously kind of ominous. We don't see practice. Practice was open during the spring and during August preseason drills, but not during the season with Brian Kelly. So we can't tell you firsthand what he looked like. But he's experienced now. He's a veteran quarterback. He knows his limitations, and he's got, like I said, he's got to have that dual threat capability. I think for LSU to have a chance to do something to make this very formidable Georgia defense be a little on its heels and maybe a little unsure of itself. I will say this about Jaden Daniels. There were a couple of games earlier this season where he left with injuries. He came back the next week. He was hurt twice in the Texas A&M game. He came back both times. After he hurt the ankle on the 2-point conversion try late in the game, he came back after that. And so he's been pretty resilient and very resilient, actually. So that bodes well for LSU. But obviously, this is probably the worst of the injury situations that he's had. Now, Brian Kelly said, hey, we can win with Garrett Nussmeier, the backup quarterback. And, of course, that's what you expect him to say. But I don't think anyone really is buying that.
That spread would be in the 20s if Garrett Nussmeier was starting, I think. That's for sure. Look, he played the flu game at Arkansas as well and won that game. Didn't play all that well, but he was sick. So Jaden Daniels resilient. All those things absolutely correct. It's still going to be a tall order for the Tigers. We'll circle back in a few minutes, give our official picks on the game. But in the meantime, let's widen the scope a little bit and talk about Conference Championship weekend and the National Championship picture. Here's the Conference Championships coming up. Pac-12 game is tonight. USC a 3-point favorite against Utah. TCU down to a 1.5-point favorite against K-State in the Big 12 game tomorrow. That's an 11 a.m. Central Time kick. Those are the two games everybody's got their eye on. I think everybody thinks if USC loses, probably Ohio State at number 5 moves in. What is your sense? What happens if USC and TCU should both lose?
I think TCU could still be in because I think they have enough quality wins over the course of the season. That all depends how they look, and the committee does look at that. They talked about Tennessee, being with a body of work. Why are they behind Alabama? Because they have the same record, and Bama's at 6 and Tennessee's at 7. They have the same record. Well, Tennessee beat Alabama. Well, Tennessee got smoked by South Carolina. That's why you can't imagine Alabama giving up 63 points to South Carolina. So I think it would come down to the eye test and how they like. TCU's done a lot to impress the committee, obviously, to this point, and I think they would hang in there. They would be Ohio State. I think there's a ceiling on Alabama. Maybe that's what a lot of people. Maybe that's what a lot of people want to hear who are weary of seeing Alabama in the playoff. By the way, we've never had a playoff without Alabama or Clemson in it. So, this thing started in 2014. So that would be That would be a first. But I think TCU could still hang on. I think Michigan too. Being up at number 2 could hang out if they lose to Purdue. Very similar game and a similar point spread to the SEC championship game. But those are the interesting ones. And Tulane favorite over a team that they lost to at home. Was that in New Orleans?
Those were both, yeah. Just like tomorrow's game will be at Yulman Stadium.
That'll be interesting. Obviously, Tulane playing for a Cotton Bowl bid, and they haven't been to a major bowl in 80 years. So it's really a historic game for them as well.
Yeah, I think if you took the win totals between Tulane and LSU at the beginning of the year, you got like 11.5, and here they are at 18 and counting. So a pretty spectacular year for those two schools. And of course, Southern also in the SWAC championship game.
Yes.
Big underdogs at Jackson State with Deion Sanders. Maybe Deion's like looking west, though. Maybe he's worried about Colorado, and Southern can catch him napping.
Well, I mean, you'd hope for some kind of edge. Right? Southern lost pretty big to them. Remember, College Game Day was in Jackson for that game earlier this year, and I think it ended up being 35-0. Southern obviously, hey, they played well. They're in the game. You've got a chance. It's college football. Someone said to me, we don't see these kind of spreads in the NFL, right? But typically, it's a little more predictable. But college football is a little crazier. And just the fact that these teams are in the championship game, that they're in these positions in unexpected ways. Like I was here in July for SEC Media Days. Not one person picked LSU to win the West. Not one. They were picked 5th overall, and it seemed well justified. But crazy things can happen, and you can have an upset. You can have Joe Namath and the Jets beat the Baltimore Colts, and it wouldn't be that totally surprising. So. I give everybody a puncher's chance in these championship games. We've seen upsets before. Of course, they won't all be upsets, but I think there'll be an upset somewhere. Tomorrow or tonight, between tonight and tomorrow, there's going to be an upset with someone in one of these conference championship games, and that's what we love about college football.
Yeah, I particularly like K-State, and I know that would be the smallest of the upsets.
K-State. I think I picked K-State too in our picks.
But K-State only a 1.5-point underdog now. By the way, there has not been a double-digit underdog winner in a Power 5 conference championship game. So that's a lot. One more time, in a Power 5 conference championship game, a double-digit underdog has not won since the 2005 ACC championship game. I believe that was I got it all wrong now. It was Florida State and Virginia Tech, I believe, and Florida State won that game. But that was the last time. It's been a long time since that happened. So that's what LSU's facing tomorrow. That's what Purdue is facing tomorrow as a double-digit favorite. And by the way, you mentioned, as we take a look at the national championship odds now, what this could mean going forward. Look, Georgia, a prohibitive favorite, because even if they lose this game, they're going to go into the college football playoff. And you would think, Rab, even if they lose, they'd be maybe no worse than the number 2 seed. Maybe they fall behind Michigan, but that would be probably about it.
Yeah, it depends what else happens in the other games. But yes, Georgia is not falling out. I don't think there's anyone that thinks that they would. They were in the playoff last year when they lost the championship game to Alabama, and they stayed in pretty handily. It ended up being like 41-24, and they stayed in, and I forget what seed they were, but they probably 3, and they came back and they won the national championship. So, Georgia has earned their place as the favorite. Michigan is the second choice. Ohio State is the third choice. That's interesting to me, since they're not even in the playoff right now, and it's like this Vegas expecting one of these teams to drop out. Probably TCU, I would suppose, expecting maybe USC to win. So, I think Ohio State is they certainly shouldn't give up hope. 11-1, sitting right there. They should have hope and root for one of these upsets, or probably 2 would be best for the Buckeyes. But I can see why their odds are probably like that. And then TCU, and then Alabama still lurking there. You can't totally. The Alabama they're like a vampire. You can't totally put them away. They're still going to be lurking around. So, those are interesting odds. But Georgia, as the prohibitive favorite, is interesting. But boy, being the favorite is a tough thing to be in the college football playoff.
No doubt about it.
In general, LSU pulled it off 3 years ago as the favorite and the number 1 seed, and they had the magical season. But it doesn't happen most of the time. So, Georgia, while they've earned that spot, they're not just a shoe-in to win it.
Yep. It was interesting. You mentioned Ohio State's odds. Max Meyer from Caesar Sportsbook, our sponsor, of course, was on yesterday's Bayou Bets edition. It's worth going back and clicking that and fast forward to about the 20-minute mark when Max comes on. He talks about Ohio State. They actually, after losing to Michigan, had dropped them all the way to 50-1 to win the national championship. But sharp bettors everywhere started pounding that total, increased their liability so much that they had to then go down to 30-1, 25-1, 20-1. Finally, now it's at 7.5-1, which is probably too low. I don't think there's any value left on it now because you do need a loss. You need Ohio State to get in, and even then, as the 4 seed, they'll have to go play Georgia, most likely in the semifinals. So listen, you can't count them out, like you said. And 50-1 certainly was a number that was too high. Bettors were all over it. So look out for Ohio State. And if you parlayed USC and TCU to win, you would be getting plus odds, which tells you there's a less than 50-50 chance that both of those schools
game. And then, by the way, as an aside, and I love all the bowl stuff. There's a possibility that if Ohio State doesn't make the playoff, that the Rose Bowl will not invite them because they had them last year. Or they will invite Penn State because they've got this rule where they could take Penn State out of the Orange Bowl, maybe open up an opening for somebody like Tennessee or something like that. And all this somehow, according to the Athletics website, could maybe send LSU to, if they lose, to the Las Vegas Bowl, which I know would please a lot of LSU fans. Please a lot of LSU fans for them to wind up in the Las Vegas Bowl instead of like the Citrus Bowl, where almost every other prediction has them going if they lose.
And they've been several times before. It's a destination everyone knows. So
and they're going there next year to open the season against Florida State. They're going to be in Orlando.
Sure. Vegas against maybe a UCLA would be very interesting. Very interesting game, Brian Kelly's offense. So let's circle back. We apologize. I did have audio issues there just for a second. But we're back, and we want to talk. Rab's just talking about LSU's bowl situation. Could end up in Las Vegas. Ultimately, we will see what happens tomorrow. And I think ultimately this season is a success for LSU and Brian Kelly, no matter what happens. You can lose this game by 40 tomorrow. You're playing with house money, to borrow a gambling term. Do you agree with that? And do you think that LSU's fan base agrees with that?
I think the more you win, the more people want. And so that's why you have the level of disappointment and embarrassment, quite honestly, of losing to Texas A&M. But yes, I agree with that overall. I think once people step back and say, hey, you've won 9 games and a chance to win 10 in a bowl game, and you beat Alabama, and you beat Ole Miss, and you had this remarkable season to get all the way to the SEC championship game, worst to first. I mean, LSU was last year in the SEC West, and now they've won the division and they're representing the West in the championship game. So yes, you have to say it's an accomplishment. You have to say it's an achievement just getting here. No one's going to be totally satisfied if they lose tomorrow to Georgia. Obviously, you want it all. You want the championship. That's why you're playing for the championship. But I think to reasonable people, and that's not always the case with fans, of course. But if you really look at it and say this has been an achievement of a season, and more than anyone expected it could be in year 1 under Brian Kelly, and bodes well for the future. And of course, that just means the expectations will be higher next year.
Yeah, no, that's the blessing and curse of being at a school like LSU is that the more you win, the more people expect to win. Just ask Nick Saban how that works at both LSU and Alabama. All right, so it's prediction time. The game is less than 24 hours away now. Look, I don't know that anyone is going to pick LSU to win this game. If you do, you're going way out on a limb. But what's your final score prediction?
I said 27-12. I think LSU covers slightly. I think their defense is good enough. I think Georgia, like I said, if Georgia can get up on LSU, they're not predicated on just trying to go and go and go and go. They're like, okay, we got you at arm's length. Think of a big brother fighting with little brother and trying to hold him at arm's length while little brother is swinging in air. That's what Georgia wants to do to LSU. That's the position they want them to be in. And I don't see LSU being embarrassed in this game. I see them. They bounced back after the Florida State loss at the start of the season. They bounced back after the loss to Tennessee with 5 straight wins, including starting on the road at Florida. They've done that pretty well this year, and I think there's still enough of the structure and the buy-in of this season that they give a reasonable accounting of themselves. I think they have a chance to win. I don't want to say I'm totally dumping on the Tigers, but I don't see it happening. But I don't think they get embarrassed either. I think it's a reasonable accounting of themselves, and they just sneak in under the wire, maybe by field goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mostly agree with you. Georgia does not tend to put up 50 and 60 points on teams. That's not going to be a concern if you're betting against the spread. I went just slightly the other way. I went 37-17 Georgia, just a couple of points above the spread. Ultimately, I think Jaden Daniels' injury could make a difference. He's going to play. We know that. Is he going to be 100% effective, particularly in the running game? That's what I worry about. And if you take that element away, now you're giving a great defense just that much more help. And so I do think, maybe LSU scores some late, but I like 37-17 Georgia. So we have one with LSU with the points, one Georgia with the points, or minus the points, I should say. But ultimately, I think everyone would agree it would be a surprise if LSU won. If you think so, plus 600 at Caesar Sportsbook, you can pay off those holiday presents, put $100 down, win 700 at those 6-1 odds. So you never know. We'll be back with you tomorrow, live from the stadium, Facebook Live on the Bet.NOLA Facebook page, Bayou Bets TikTok, Twitter. Follow us along. We might even get Scott Rabalais to come back. Scott, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, Zach. Thanks for having me.
All right, and that is a live special edition of Bayou Bets from Atlanta for the SEC Championship game. Enjoy the game. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.